They handed me a duffel bag, $200, and a rusted iron key. Then they told me to go build a life. I was 18 years old that morning. 18 years old, standing on a cracked sidewalk outside the only home I'd ever known, holding a key that didn't fit any door I could see. The woman from the group home hugged me the way you hug a stranger at a funeral. Quick, polite, already turning away. Inside my bag was a letter, from a grandmother I barely remembered. A deed to 6 acres of land somewhere in the mountains. And a debt, $15,000 I never borrowed, owed to men I'd never met. My grandmother had been dead for 2 months. I hadn't known. Nobody thought to tell me. She left me a rusted metal shack in the middle of nowhere. She left me a fight I didn't ask for. She left me a mystery that would nearly break me before it saved me. For 13 years, I thought I knew the reason she let me go. I was carrying the wrong story. What I found on that land, buried in a wooden box beneath her books, changed everything I thought I knew about love, about family, about what it means to come home. This is the story of the key she left me. And the door I never expected it to open. The duffel bag weighed more than it should have. Not because of what was inside. There wasn't much. 2 pairs of jeans. 3 shirts folded the way they teach you at Ravenhill, corners tucked, edges sharp, like a soldier's bunk. A toothbrush still in its plastic. A photograph I couldn't bring myself to look at. No. The weight was something else. It was the weight of a door closing behind me for the last time. I stood on the curb outside the Ravenhill home for girls at 7:40 in the morning, and the March wind cut through my jacket like it had a personal grievance. The sky was that flat, mean gray you only get in early spring. The kind of sky that promises rain and delivers something colder. Miss Hendricks stood beside me. She had a clipboard. She always had a clipboard. "You got everything, Wren?" "Yes, ma'am." "Bus ticket?" "Yes." "Envelope?" I nodded. My throat was doing that thing. That closing thing. She handed me a manila envelope. Thick. Soft at the corners, from being handled too many times before it ever reached me. My name was written across the front in someone else's handwriting. Not hers. "This came 6 weeks ago," she said. "From a law office. It's about your grandmother's estate." My grandmother. The word landed strange. Like a stone dropped into a well I'd forgotten I had. "My grandmother is dead?" Miss Hendricks's face did something complicated. Softened for a second. Then pulled back into the careful, professional shape she wore like a uniform. 2 months ago, honey. I'm sorry. Nobody notified us until the estate paperwork came through. 2 months. She had been dead for 2 months, and no one had told me. I opened my mouth to say something. Nothing came out. So I closed it again. "There's a bus ticket in the envelope." Town called Ridgemont, up in the mountains. "And there's a key." And she hesitated. "There's some legal complications. A lien on the property. The lawyer's name is in there. A woman named Winifred Holloway. She'll explain everything." A lien? I didn't even know what that meant. I was 18 years old, and I had $200 in cash, and a duffel bag, and a dead grandmother I could barely remember, and now I had a lien. Whatever that was. Miss Hendricks touched my shoulder. Briefly. The way you touch something that isn't quite yours. "Good luck, Wren." And then she was walking back toward the building, her sensible shoes clicking against the concrete. Her clipboard already open to the next name on the next list. I watched her go. I stood there a long time. The bus station smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner and the perfume of a woman who had gotten off before me. I sat on a plastic bench under a flickering fluorescent light, and I opened the envelope because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The key came out first. It was heavier than I expected. Old iron, pitted with rust in some places, dark and smooth in others, where a thumb had worn it down over decades. I turned it over. There was no tag, no label, just the key itself, cold in my palm, like it had been waiting. I set it on the bench beside me. Then the deed. Yellowed paper. Legal words I didn't understand. 6 acres. Ridgemont Township. Some numbers that meant nothing. Then the lien papers. $15,000, plus accumulated interest and fees. Owed to a company called Blackstone Holdings LLC. I read the number 3 times. My hands were not steady. I had 200. I laughed. Actually laughed. A small, cracked laugh that came out sounding more like a cough. The woman across from me looked up over her magazine. I looked away. And then, at the very bottom of the envelope, folded so many times the creases had gone soft as fabric, was a letter. The paper was cream-colored, thick, expensive feeling. My name on the front. Written in a handwriting I didn't remember, but somehow recognized. The way you recognize a song you haven't heard since childhood. Not the words. Just the shape of it. I opened it. My dearest Wren, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are grown, and I have run out of time to say the things I should have said. There is so much I need to tell you, but I am afraid a letter cannot hold it all. So I will tell you the most important thing first, and I will trust the rest to unfold in its own time. I did not give you up because I did not love you. I gave you up because I did. Please, come to the land. Everything I could not tell you, I have left there. All of it. Every answer. Every reason. Every apology. The key is yours. The land is yours. The truth is yours. I only ask that you come and find it. I have loved you every single day, Wren. Even the days you thought I hadn't. Especially those days. Your grandmother, Adelaide. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Somewhere in the station, a voice on a loudspeaker was announcing a departure. I couldn't understand the words. My ears were ringing. I did not give you up because I did not love you. For 13 years. For 13 years, I had believed one thing. I had built my whole self on top of it. The way you build a house on top of a foundation you never examined. You just trust it. You just live inside it. I gave you up because I did. I put the letter back in the envelope. My hands were shaking, so badly I could barely close the flap. The loudspeaker crackled again. Ridgemont. Boarding at gate 4. I stood up. The bus took 6 hours. I watched the city dissolve. The suburbs stretched thin, then broke apart into fields. The fields gave way to hills. The hills climbed into mountains. Real mountains. The kind that don't apologize. The other passengers thinned out at every stop. By the time we crossed into the last county, before Ridgemont, there were only 4 of us left. An old man in a Korean War veteran's cap, who slept the whole way. A young mother with a baby who never once cried. A woman my age, with headphones and a bruise on her cheekbone she was trying to cover with hair. And me. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, and I watched the world get smaller and older and quieter. I gave you up because I did. The words kept looping, kept turning over, kept catching on something inside me that hadn't been touched in a very long time. Because if it was true, if it was actually true, then everything I had told myself about who I was, I didn't finish the thought. I couldn't. Not yet. Ridgemont was smaller than I expected. And I hadn't expected much. One main street. A gas station with a hand-painted sign. A diner with a Coca-Cola clock in the window that had stopped at 3:47 on some forgotten afternoon. A post office. A church with a white steeple that looked like it was holding up the sky by itself. And a general store. Pearson's, according to the faded lettering on the window. The bus hissed and pulled away. I stood on the sidewalk with my duffel bag and my rusted key, and I realized I had no idea what to do next. The deed said 6 acres on Ridge Road. It didn't say where Ridge Road was. I looked at the general store. I walked in. A bell jangled overhead. The inside smelled like sawdust and coffee and old wood. Shelves went up to the ceiling. Every inch of them was used. Cans of soup. Bags of flour. Fishing tackle. A rack of postcards nobody had touched in years. A woman was behind the counter. 58, maybe 60. Silver hair pulled back into a loose braid. She was reading a paperback with a broken spine. She looked up when the bell rang. She looked at me. Her face did something. Not surprise. Not exactly. Recognition. She stood up very slowly. She set the book down. She came around the counter. She stopped about 3 feet from me, and she just looked. Her eyes moved across my face the way you might read a letter you had waited a long time for. "Oh," she said, very soft. "Oh, honey." I didn't know what to say. "You have her eyes," she said. "Whose?" But I already knew. "Adelaide's," she whispered. "My God, you have Adelaide's eyes." She reached out. She touched my cheek. Just once. Her hand smelled like lavender and pencil lead. Then she pulled it back. She wiped her own eye with the back of her wrist. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry. I've been waiting a long time to see you. My name is Cora Pearson." "Everyone calls me Cora. Your grandmother was." She stopped. She swallowed. "Your grandmother was the finest woman I ever knew." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Again. Cora seemed to understand. She walked back behind the counter. She started pulling things off shelves. A bottle of water. A loaf of bread. A block of cheddar. 2 apples. A candy bar she added at the last minute, like she couldn't help it. She put it all in a paper sack. "You'll need this," she said. "It's a walk. I can pay. You will not." "But, Wren." She said my name like she had said it before. Many times. To someone else in some other life. "You will not." I closed my mouth. She handed me the sack. Then she pulled a piece of paper from under the counter and drew a map. Quick, practice lines. She had drawn this map before. "Ridge Road is out that way. Past the church. About 4 miles. You'll see a mailbox with no name on it. That's the turnoff. Path from there is another mile. Steep in places. Watch your ankles. Thank you. Wren." I looked up. "Silas will come," she said. "Probably tomorrow morning. Maybe the day after. Don't be afraid of him. He looks rougher than he is. He was your grandmother's oldest friend." "Silas? You'll know him when you see him." She hesitated. Then she came around the counter one more time. She hugged me. Quick. Firm. The way a woman hugs a girl she has been imagining for a very long time. "Welcome home, honey," she whispered. And then she let me go before I could break, which was kind of her, because I would have. The road out of town turned to gravel within a 1/4 mile. Then to dirt. The trees closed in on both sides. Tall pines. bare hardwoods still waiting for spring. The wind moved through them in long, low sighs, like the woods were breathing. I had never been anywhere this quiet. My city ears kept expecting sirens, horns, voices, something. Nothing came. Just the crunch of my sneakers on gravel. Just my own breath. Just the birds, whose names I didn't know, calling to each other across the branches. For miles is a long way when you're 18 and tired and carrying everything you own. For miles is longer when you don't know what's waiting at the end of it. I walked. The sun started slipping down behind the ridges. The light turned gold, then pink, then something else. Something I didn't have a word for. And then I saw the mailbox. Bent. Rusted. No name. I turned. The path was narrow. Overgrown. Roots twisted across it like the woods were trying to take it back. I climbed. My legs were burning. My shoulders ached from the bag. The paper sack from Cora was clutched against my chest like a life preserver. And then the trees opened. And I saw it. And I stopped. It was a shack. That's the honest word for it. A long, half-cylinder of corrugated metal. The kind of thing they used to build during the war, when they needed shelter fast, and didn't care what it looked like. Quonset hut. I didn't know the word yet. I only knew that it was rusted the color of old blood. That one of the windows was cracked. That a crooked stovepipe stuck out of the top like a broken finger. Around it, 6 acres of nothing. A garden plot gone to weeds. A chicken coop with its roof caved in. A well with a stone rim, moss-eaten. A fence that had given up years ago. This was it. This was the inheritance. This was what my grandmother had died protecting. I stood at the edge of the clearing, and I felt something inside me sink. Slow. All the way down. The wind moved through the metal. It made a low, groaning sound. I walked toward the door. My hand was shaking when I put the key in the lock. It didn't want to turn. It fought me. Then, with a sound like a bone cracking, it gave. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Cold air. Rust. Dust. The dry, papery scent of mice long gone. Under that, faintly, something else. Something older. Cedar, maybe? Or the ghost of something once baked. I stepped inside. The last of the daylight followed me in, through the doorway. A single beam of gold cutting, through a room full of drifting dust. The interior was one long curved space. The metal ribs of the ceiling arched overhead like a whale's rib cage. The floor was concrete, cracked, uneven. In the corner sat a pot-bellied stove, black and squat. A woodpile beside it, stacked neat, as if someone had left it ready. A cot. Then mattress. A single wool blanket folded at the foot. A wooden table. One chair. A wall of rough-hewn shelves. Books. A few tin plates. A single blue mug. And that was all. That was everything. That was my inheritance. I sat down on the chair. I put the duffel bag on the floor. I put my face in my hands. And I cried the way you cry when you have been holding it since you were 5 years old. I don't know how long. Long enough that the last of the light went out of the doorway. Long enough that the shack turned to shadow around me. Long enough that, when I finally lifted my head, I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The darkness out here was not like city darkness. City darkness has edges. It has streetlights. It has the yellow glow of somebody else's window. City darkness is really just a dimmer kind of light. This was not that. This was the darkness before humans invented fire. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear the wind pressing against the metal walls, testing them. I could hear something moving in the woods. Something small, probably. Almost certainly small. Almost. I fumbled for the duffel bag. I dug through it. My fingers found the little flashlight Miss Hendricks had given me. I clicked it on. The beam was thin. Weak. It made the room look worse, not better. It threw jagged shadows against the curved walls. The stovepipe. The cot. The books on the shelf. I got up. I don't know why. Maybe because sitting still felt like drowning. I walked to the shelves. I ran the flashlight along the spines. The Encyclopedia of Edible Wild Plants. Basic Homestead Carpentry. A Field Guide to the Appalachian Mountains. The Cobb Builder's Handbook. Practical books. Every one of them. And then, tucked behind them, pushed almost against the back wall, something that wasn't a book. A wooden box. Small. Simple. No lock. No decoration. Just a plain wooden box with a brass clasp. But it wasn't dusty. Every other thing on that shelf was gray with years of neglect. The box had been wiped clean. Recently. Everything I could not tell you, I have left there. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. I reached for it. It was heavier than it looked. I carried it back to the table. I set it down. My hands were doing that shaking thing again. I opened the clasp. Inside, laid out on faded blue velvet like something precious, were two things. A stack of letters, tied with twine, and a leather-bound journal. I lifted the top letter, with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. The envelope had one word on it. Wren. I opened it. My dearest Wren, if you are reading this, then you did not turn back at the door. That is the first thing I need you to know. You are stronger than you have ever been told. I have imagined this moment for many years. I have written this letter more times than I can count. Each time I threw it away. Each time I tried again. Because the truth of what I have to tell you is not simple, and it is not gentle, and you deserve to hear it in the right order. So let me begin at the beginning. Your mother was my only child. Her name was Marisol, and she was the light of my life. When she married your father, I gained a son too. His name was Nathaniel. He was kind, and he was funny, and he was a little too trusting of the world. They wanted a child so badly, Wren. They tried for years. When you came, they wept. Both of them. Standing beside the hospital bed, holding you, weeping like they had been given a gift they were not sure they deserved. I want you to know that. I need you to know that. You were not an accident. You were not unwanted. You were prayed for. I had to stop reading. I put the letter down on the table. I couldn't breathe. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at the paper, just breathing in, out, trying to remember that my body knew how to do this without me telling it. You were prayed for. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Nobody. In 13 years, in every group home, in every case file, in every folder passed, from one social worker to another, no one had ever written those 3 words down beside my name. You were prayed for. I wiped my eyes. I picked the letter back up. When you were 3, your mother got sick. It came fast. The doctors used the word cancer the way people say the word war. Like it was something inevitable. Something that could not be argued with. But Nathaniel argued. He was going to save her. He was going to try everything. He would not accept the answer they gave him. There is a kind of company, Wren. A kind of man. They circle around people in desperate moments. They wear suits. They speak softly. They call themselves lenders, or investors, or partners. But they are not. They are wolves. Nathaniel signed a paper he should not have signed. It was for a company called Blackstone Holdings. The papers looked like they said one thing. They actually said another. By the time your mother passed, The debt was 5 times what he had borrowed. By the time your father died a year later, they had already begun coming to my door. They wanted the land. They had wanted this land for a very long time. Long before you were born. But now they had leverage. Now they had a debt. And now they had you. You were 4 years old, Wren. And they told me, in words as soft as silk, that you would be a valuable form of collateral. Do you understand what they meant? I did. I understood immediately. I set the letter down again. The room was very quiet. The wind outside had gone still. Collateral. They had wanted to take me. To use me. A 4-year-old child. To force my grandmother to sign away everything she had. I picked the letter back up. My hands had stopped shaking. Something else had started, somewhere lower. Something hot. Something old. I went to the sheriff. I went to a lawyer. I went to the pastor at the church. I went to everyone I could think of. They all told me the same thing. These men had done nothing illegal. Not yet. And by the time they did, it would be too late. So I made a choice. It was the hardest choice of my life. I called social services. I told them I could no longer care for you. I signed you over to the state, and I watched them drive you away, and I did not stop them. I did not run after the car. I did not tell you goodbye the way I wanted to. Because if I had, you would have remembered. You would have believed I loved you. And you would have come back looking. And if you came back looking, they would find you. I needed you to believe I did not want you. I needed you to hate me a little, if that was what it took. I needed you to build a life somewhere they could not reach you. Anonymous. Untraceable. Safe. I stayed here on this land, Wren. I stayed here for 13 years. I refused every offer they made. I documented every phone call, every threat, every visit. I built a case against them that will one day matter if you are brave enough to use it. The debt they claim you owe is the same one they used to hurt your father. They have attached it to this property. They will come for you now, the way they came for him. They will offer to forgive it in exchange for the land. They will make it sound generous. Do not sign anything. Do not sell. There is a lawyer in town named Winifred Holloway. She was my friend. She knows all of this. She has the documents. She is waiting for you. And there are others, Wren. Others who love me. Others who will love you if you let them. There is a man named Silas Beaumont who lives on the next property over. He was closer to me than any brother could have been. His wife, Marlene, is the finest woman I have ever known. Trust them. They know your story. They have been waiting. My darling girl. My Wren. I chose your life over my own heart. Every day, for 13 years, I chose your life. I would choose it again. I would choose it 1,000 times. I am so sorry I could not tell you sooner. I love you. I have always loved you. I loved you every hour of every day, even the hours you spent believing otherwise. The land is yours. The truth is yours. The rest is up to you. Come home, my darling. You are already home. Your grandmother, Adelaide, I don't remember putting the letter down. I remember the sound I made. Not a word. Not a sob. Something older than either. I remember sliding out of the chair and onto the concrete floor. I remember pulling my knees up. I remember pressing my forehead against them and rocking just a little, just enough to keep from flying apart. 13 years. 13 years of a story I had told myself. 13 years of a foundation I had built my whole life on. She hadn't given me away. She had saved me. She had let me hate her, so that men in suits wouldn't come for me in the night. She had spent every day of 13 years alone in this shack, fighting a war I didn't know was being fought, and she had done it for a little girl who didn't remember her face. You were prayed for. 1,000 times. I cried until I couldn't anymore, until my throat was raw, until my whole body was empty. And then I lay there on that cold concrete floor, and the shack creaked around me, and for the first time in my entire life, I was not alone in the dark. Because now I knew. Now I knew someone had been holding me the whole time. I just hadn't been able to feel it. I woke up on the floor. The first pale gray of dawn was coming through the cracked window. My back hurt. My eyes were swollen almost shut. My cheek was pressed against the concrete. I sat up slowly. Everything ached. The good kind of ache. The kind that comes after you have finally let something go. The letter was still on the table. The wooden box was still open. The world had not ended. I had made it through the night. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked to the door, and I opened it. The morning was cold and clean. Mist hung low over the clearing. The trees stood black against a sky that was slowly turning the color of a robin's egg. And there, sitting on the top step of my grandmother's porch, my porch, now, was a basket. I stopped. A basket. Woven. Old. Someone had set it there quietly. Someone who had not knocked. Someone who had not wanted to disturb me. I bent down. Inside, a loaf of bread wrapped in a clean cloth. 6 brown eggs. A small jar of honey. A folded piece of paper. I opened the paper. 2 words. In a hand that had never learned to write in cursive. Welcome home. That was it. That was all. I stood there on the porch in the cold blue morning holding a loaf of bread that a stranger had baked for me, and I thought about the fact that somewhere, out in these woods, someone had gotten up before dawn to bring me food. Someone who knew my name. Someone who had known my grandmother. Someone who had been waiting. He came at noon. I heard the truck first. It was old. It didn't so much drive as it did complain its way down the path. Every bolt in it sounded like it was thinking about quitting. Then it stopped. The engine cut. A door opened. A door closed. Bootsteps on gravel. I stepped out onto the porch. My hand was on the doorframe. My legs were doing that shaky thing again, but I made them hold. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and lean the way men get when they have spent their whole lives outdoors. 65, maybe. Silver white beard. Skin the color of an old saddle. He wore a canvas coat that had seen more winters than I had been alive. A wool cap. Work boots caked with dried mud. He stopped about 10 feet from the porch. He took his hat off. He held it against his chest. He looked at me for a long time without speaking. Then he said, very quiet, "You look just like her." I couldn't answer. He nodded once. Like he had expected that. Named Silas Beaumont. Your grandmother. His voice caught. He cleared it. Your grandmother was the best friend I ever had. I nodded. It was all I could do. He looked past me at the shack. You slept in there last night? Yes. Get cold? Yes. He nodded again. He seemed to be a man who did a lot of thinking between words. You know how to work a stove? No. You know how to draw water from a hand pump? No. You know anything about anything out here? No. He almost smiled. Not quite. Just the corner of his mouth. Well, he said, that's a place to start. He put his hat back on. He walked to the truck. He came back with an armload of firewood split fine, dry as bone. He walked past me into the shack without asking. He knelt at the stove. He worked in a silence that wasn't unfriendly, just complete. Within 5 minutes, there was a fire. Within 10, The shack was starting to warm. He stood up. He brushed his hands on his jeans. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "Bring some things. You need anything today, my place is that way." He pointed east. "Half a mile. You'll see the roof through the trees. Mr. Beaumont." "Silas. Silas." My voice cracked on it. "Why are you doing this?" He stopped in the doorway. He didn't turn around. For a long moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Because I promised her I would." And he walked out to his truck. And he drove away. And I stood there in the doorway of my rusted metal shack, warm for the first time in a day and a half, watching the taillights of a stranger who had promised my grandmother he would come. Marlene came in the late afternoon. I heard her singing before I saw her. It was a small sound at first. A hymn, I think. Something old. Something that traveled through the trees the way wood smoke does, slow, curling, unhurried. Then she came around the bend in the path, and I saw her. She was small. That surprised me. Her husband was tall and lean, and I had somehow expected her to match him. But she was small. Round. 62, maybe. Her hair was a soft, uncomplicated silver, cut short around a face that had spent its life smiling. She wore a wool coat, dark green, buttoned to the neck. She carried a wicker basket over one arm and a folded quilt over the other. She saw me on the porch. She stopped. She put a hand to her mouth. And then she started crying. Right there. Standing on the path, with her basket, and her quilt, and her small round shoulders shaking under a wool coat that was too warm for the afternoon. I didn't know what to do. I stepped down off the porch. I walked toward her. She dropped the basket. She dropped the quilt. She opened her arms. And I walked into them. I don't know why. I don't know how. I didn't know this woman. I had never seen her face. I had never heard her voice until she was singing. But she held out her arms. And I walked into them. And she folded around me like she had been holding this hug for 13 years. Which I would later learn she had. "Oh," she was whispering into my hair. "Oh, my girl. Oh, my brave, brave girl. You came. You came home." I was crying now, too. I couldn't help it. I had cried more in the last 18 hours than I had cried in the last 5 years combined, and I could not seem to stop, and this small round woman was rocking me back and forth on a dirt path in the middle of nowhere, and she smelled like cinnamon and old wool and something else. Then I got it. She smelled like a grandmother. Not mine. Not literally. But the way books tell you grandmothers smell. The way children believe grandmothers smell, before they know any better. "I've been waiting for you," she was saying. "I've been waiting for you for 13 years. Adelaide showed me your picture every year on your birthday. Every year, Wren. Every single year. She'd bake a cake she couldn't eat, and she'd sit at her table, and she'd hold up your picture, and we'd sing to you. Just her and me. Sitting in that little shack, singing happy birthday to a girl we weren't allowed to touch. Something inside me broke. Something big. I just stood there in the dirt path, and I sobbed against her wool coat, and she held me, and she rocked me, and she sang under her breath, and the wind moved through the trees like it was trying to be quiet for us. She stayed until dark. She made me eat. She had brought chicken soup in a thermos, still warm, and she poured it into the blue mug, and she watched me drink every drop. She had brought biscuits and butter in a small crock, and an apple pie in a tin with a crust that was still crisp. She unfolded the quilt. It was hand-stitched. Deep blues and forest greens, and a border of tiny yellow stars. "I made this the year they took you," she said. Her voice was careful. Even. I made it hoping I'd get to give it to you someday. Silas said I was foolish. He said we might never see you. But I made it anyway. I finished it, and I folded it, and I put it in a cedar chest, and I waited. She spread it over the cot. There, she said. That's better. I sat down on the cot. I ran my fingers over the stitching. It was so fine, so even. Every stitch a small act of faith by a woman I had never met. She sat down beside me. She took my hand, and she told me the rest. Adelaide and I were girls together, Marlene said. Grew up on the same road, 3 miles apart. We met when we were 7 at the church picnic, and we decided that day that we would be best friends until we died. We kept the promise. She died first, but that's just how it worked out. The promise still holds. She smiled a little. Then the smile faded. I had a daughter, she said. Her name was Emily. She stopped. She looked at the fire in the stove for a long moment. Emily was quiet, she said. Sensitive. The kind of child who felt everything twice. She was our miracle baby. Silas and I had tried for years. When she came, we thought she was the answer to a long question. I waited. Marlene's hand tightened on mine. When Emily was 15, her father, Silas, got sick. He didn't tell me for a long time. He was scared. Men are sometimes. By the time we knew, the medical bills were already piling up. And Blackstone Holdings. She said the name the way you say a curse. Blackstone Holdings offered us a loan. It sounded like the answer to our prayers. Silas signed the papers. He signed them because he trusted the world. He signed them because he thought a company would honor its word. She was very quiet for a moment. They took our farm, she said, in pieces, little by little. They took the barn. They took the pasture. They took my mother's china, sold at auction to pay for a debt that had tripled overnight. By the time Emily was 16, we had 1 room left of a house we had built with our own hands. Silas had survived his cancer, and we had lost everything else. Her voice was very steady. She had told this story before. Emily started sleeping too much. She stopped eating. She stopped going to school. I took her to a doctor. He gave her pills. She took the pills, and she smiled at me, and she told me she was fine. She paused. She wasn't fine. She was looking into the fire. I don't think she was really seeing it. We lost her, she said. One Sunday morning in March. She was 16 years, 3 months, and 11 days old. She did not say more. She did not need to. Oh, I whispered. Oh, Marlene. She opened her eyes. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was clear. Adelaide came to my house that afternoon, she said. She sat with me. She did not say a single thing. She sat with me for 11 hours. She held my hand. When Silas finally came home from the sheriff's office, she got up and she looked at both of us and she made a promise. Marlene lifted my hand. She held it against her cheek. She said, "They will not have Wren. I swear it on my daughter. They will not have that child." I couldn't speak. She kept that promise, honey. Every day for 13 years, she kept it. She stayed on this land. She fought them alone. She let you go, so they could not find you. She lived in this metal shack, when she could have lived anywhere, because it was the only thing they wanted, and she would not give it to them. Marlene lowered my hand. She held it in both of hers. You are the last thing your grandmother loved on this earth, she said, and the last thing she saved. And Silas and I. Her voice finally broke. We have waited So long to meet you." The fire had burned down to embers by the time she stood to leave. She refused to let me walk her out. She said the path was familiar. She said she had walked it in the dark 1,000 times. At the door, she turned. She looked at me, standing in the doorway of my grandmother's shack, wrapped in the quilt she had made me 13 years ago. "Tomorrow," she said, "Silas will come at 7. Bring warm clothes. He's going to start teaching you." "Teaching me what?" Marlene smiled. Small, sad, full of something I did not yet have a name for. "Everything," she said. And then she was gone into the dark, and I stood in the doorway a long time, listening to her footsteps fade, watching the last light drain from the sky. I went back inside. I fed the stove. I sat at the table. I opened the leather-bound journal. The first page was in my grandmother's handwriting. "My dear Wren, the land will teach you, if you let it. The house will teach you, if you build it. The work will teach you, if you do not run. This journal is everything I learned. It is not much. It is enough. Begin with the clay. Begin with your hands. Begin." I turned the page. Diagrams, recipes, sketches of walls, of foundations, of roofs. Instructions written in her careful, patient hand. I read for hours. The fire crackled beside me. The quilt lay warm across my shoulders. Somewhere outside, an owl called into the trees, and something small answered back. I read until the words blurred. I read until the sky outside began to turn again. And when the first pale light came, through the cracked window of my grandmother's shack, I closed the journal. I stood up. I looked around the room. The rusted walls, the concrete floor, the pot-bellied stove, the wooden table, the cot with its handmade quilt, the wooden box on the table, the stack of letters, the journal, the key on the table beside them. My key, my land, my home. I was still 18 years old. I was still afraid. But for the first time in my life, I knew whose I was. And I knew that I was loved. And I knew that somewhere out in these woods, an old man was hitching up his truck to come teach me how to build a life. I put on my boots. I opened the door. The morning was cold, and clean and full of everything that had ever been waiting for me. I stepped outside. I began. Silas came at 7. He did not knock. He set a canvas bag on the porch. He set a shovel beside it. He set a coil of rope beside the shovel. Then he sat down on the top step, and he waited for me to come out. I opened the door. He looked up. "Boots on?" "Yes." "Water?" "Yes." "Hat?" "I don't have a hat." He reached into the canvas bag. He pulled out a wool cap. Dark green. Hand knit. He handed it up to me without a word. I turned it over in my hands. The stitching was familiar. I had seen it the night before on a quilt. "Marlene? Marlene." I put it on. He stood up. He picked up the shovel. He pointed east with it. "Clay." That was all he said. That was the whole lesson. We walked. The path to the creek was steep in places. Silas moved like a man who had walked this land in the dark and could still do it. Sure-footed. Unhurried. He did not slow down for me. He did not speed up. He simply moved, and I followed, and I learned very quickly to watch where he put his feet. The creek was smaller than I expected. Loud, though. Loud enough to fill up the space between us, so we didn't have to talk. Which was a mercy. Because I had not slept. Because my eyes were still swollen. Because I had lain awake for hours the night before, staring at the ceiling of my grandmother's shack, thinking about a girl I had never met named Emily, and a promise made in a farmhouse 11 years ago, and the strange fact that a stranger in a wool cap was walking down a mountain path in front of me right now, because of it. Silas stopped at a bend in the creek. He pointed with the shovel. There, in the bank, a vein of clay, red as a wound, rich as pie filling, slick where the water had polished it. He knelt down. He scooped a handful. He rolled it between his palms. He held it out to me. I took it. It was cool. Heavier than it looked. It held the shape of his fingers. Squeeze. I squeezed. Roll. I rolled. Now bend it. I bent it. It bent without breaking. It bent like it wanted to. He nodded once. Good clay, he said. Your grandmother's clay. 50 years I've watched her pull it from this bank. Same bank. Same vein. Does it run out? He stood up. He handed me the shovel. Fill the bucket. How much? Until it's full. But how much do I need? He looked at me. His eyes were the color of a river in October. Gray-green. Patient. Very old in some way I couldn't name. Wren, he said, you are going to fill that bucket 1,000 times before this house is done. You want to start with math? Or you want to start with dirt? I started with dirt. The first day, I filled the bucket 4 times. By the 4th trip up the hill, my legs were shaking, so hard I had to sit down halfway. Silas didn't say anything. He just kept walking. When I got to the top, he had already started laying a tarp near the shack. He had already brought sand from a pile behind the woodshed I hadn't noticed. He had already found a bale of oat straw from somewhere. He looked at me. Take off your boots. What? Boots? Off. Silas, it's 40 degrees out here. Feet don't lie. Boots do. I took off my boots. He dumped the first bucket of clay onto the tarp. Then a scoop of sand. Then a splash of water from the well. He stepped onto the tarp. Barefoot. 65 years old. Barefoot. On a March morning. On a pile of cold wet mud. He started walking. Slow. Steady. Turning the mud with his feet. Folding it. Pressing it. Coaxing it. He looked up. Come on. You want me to. Come on. I stepped onto the tarp. My feet went into the mud. I made a sound. Silas almost laughed. Yeah, he said. It's cold. Keep walking. You warm up quicker than you think. I walked. For an hour. My feet went numb. Then they came back. Then they went numb again. My back began to ache. My shoulders. Somewhere in the middle, I stopped thinking about the cold. Somewhere in the middle, I started thinking about my grandmother. Somewhere in the middle I understood, in a small, wordless way, that she had done this too. She had stood on this same patch of ground. She had done this same slow dance. She had felt this same mud between her toes. And she had done it alone. I looked up. Silas was watching me. You okay? Yes. You crying? No. He nodded. He looked away. He gave me the mercy of not seeing it. We treaded for another hour. By the time we stopped, I had made my first batch of cob. It was maybe enough to cover 2 square feet of wall. The shack was 30 feet long. I looked at Silas. I must have looked hopeless, because for the first time since I had met him, he smiled. A real smile. Small, weathered, kind. 1 handful at a time, he said. That's the only way anybody's ever built anything worth having. Marlene came every afternoon. She never came empty-handed. Some days it was bread. Some days it was a jar of preserves. Once in April, She brought a small brown hen in a wire cage. 4 eggs, she said. And company. I named the hen Prudence. Prudence hated me on principle. Marlene laughed the first time Prudence pecked me. Laughed the way a woman laughs, who has not laughed in a long time, and had forgotten how. She sat down on the porch steps, and she laughed until she had to wipe her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Oh, Wren," she said. "She's a mean one. Adelaide's chickens were all mean. She said mean chickens lay better." "Do they?" "No. She just liked mean chickens." I like hearing about my grandmother in these small pieces. The way Marlene gave her to me. Not all at once. Not a lecture. Not a biography. Just moments. Just a woman who liked mean chickens and burned her biscuits and could not carry a tune in a bucket but sang anyway. Just a real person, slowly becoming real to me, day by day. Marlene taught me things too. She taught me how to knead bread. How to know when the dough had been worked enough. How to slap it and hear the sound change. She taught me how to darn a sock. How to make coffee on a wood stove without burning it. How to season a cast iron pan. She taught me how to pray. That one surprised me. We were sitting on the porch one evening in late April. The light was going gold. Prudence was scratching in the dirt. Marlene had brought over a pot of stew, and we had eaten it right there on the steps, out of tin bowls, watching the sun slip behind the ridge. She set her bowl down. She reached over. She took my hand. She closed her eyes. I didn't know what to do. I closed mine too. "Lord," she said. Very simple. Very quiet. "Thank you for this food. Thank you for this evening. Thank you for bringing Wren home. Amen." She squeezed my hand once. She let go. She picked up her bowl again. That was it. That was the whole prayer. But something in me eased when she said it. Something small and tight I hadn't known was tight. Like a fist inside my chest opening its fingers. I hadn't prayed in a very long time. I had tried when I was a child. In the group home. Under my thin, scratchy blanket. I had prayed for a mother to come. For a father to come. For anyone to come. When no one came, I stopped praying. Slowly. The way a small fire goes out when nobody feeds it. But sitting there on Marlene's left, listening to her say thank you for me in front of God like I was a good thing, like I was something worth mentioning, something started to feed the fire again. Just a little. Just enough. Cora came in early May. She brought a stack of paperwork. She brought Winifred Holloway. Winifred was 55, tall, silver-haired, and she wore a navy blazer that looked like it had been to a lot of important rooms. She shook my hand with both of hers. She held on a beat longer than strangers usually did. "Wren," she said, "I have been wanting to meet you for 13 years. You knew my grandmother? I loved your grandmother." She sat at my wooden table. She spread the paperwork out. She was gentle with it, the way you might handle a wedding dress. "I'm going to explain everything," she said. "And I need you to know 2 things before I start. First, what is happening to you is not fair. Second, it is not going to go the way they think it's going to go." She smiled. It was a lawyer's smile. Careful, but real underneath. "Blackstone Holdings," she said, "is going to try to take this land. They have filed a preliminary notice, and they're going to push it toward foreclosure. They are counting on you being alone. They are counting on you being scared. They are counting on you not knowing what they know. What do they know? They know your father signed papers that a court would not honor if it saw them clearly. They know your grandmother refused to sell for 13 years. They know she documented everything they did. They know she left it all to you. She tapped a folder. This is her fund. Not money for you to live on. Money for me. For fees. For fighting. She set it up 8 years ago, when she realized the day would come. She wanted you to be able to fight. She did not want you to have to choose between eating and being defended. I stared at the folder. She thought of everything. I said, she thought of you. Winifred said, that's a different thing. She left me with papers to sign. She left me with a card that had her cell phone number on it. She left me with the words, you are not alone in this, Wren. I stood on the porch as her car pulled away. Silas was mending a piece of the coop. Marlene was in the garden bed, tearing out old vines to make room for peas. I watched them for a long moment. I was not alone. I was standing on the land my grandmother had died protecting, surrounded by strangers who kept showing up. For me. Because of her. Because of love that had been running underground for 13 years, unseen, unfelt, and was now surfacing everywhere I looked. May turned into June. The days got longer. The clay got easier to work. I had built up 2 full sections of wall now. Uneven. Lumpy. Beautiful in a way I could not have imagined a month before. I had started to sleep through the night. Silas had started to laugh sometimes. Marlene had started calling me sweetheart, and it did not feel like a word. It felt like a place. And then, on a Wednesday night in early June, I woke up, because something was wrong. I did not know what. I lay in the dark under Marlene's quilt, and I listened. The night was too quiet. Prudence was silent in her coop. Prudence was never silent. Prudence had opinions at all hours. Then I smelled it. Smoke. Not wood smoke. Not the good kind. Something else. I sat up. I got out of bed. I ran to the door. I opened it. The coop was on fire. The whole thing. Flames leaping up into the black June sky. The dry timbers going up like paper. And inside, I could hear Prudence. I could hear my mean brown hen. I could hear her screaming. I don't remember running. I remember being at the coop. I remember the door was hot. I remember tearing at the latch. I remember something on my hand that hurt, and then I remember it hurting more, and then I remember the door coming open and reaching in. I got 2 of them out. The other 3 were already gone. I sat down in the dirt, with a hen in each arm, and I watched my grandmother's coop burn to the ground. I did not cry. Not right away. Some part of me was still on delay, still catching up. And then I saw it. Nailed to a fence post. A piece of paper. White. Fresh. Clean even in the middle of all that smoke. I stood up. I walked over. I pulled it off. 2 lines. Handwritten. Sell. Or next time it's the dog. I read it once. I read it twice. I stood in the dark holding a piece of paper and 2 shaking hens, and I understood, for the first time in my life, what it felt like to be hunted. Silas got there before sunrise. I don't know who called him. Maybe he had seen the smoke from his ridge. Maybe he had just known, the way people know things sometimes, when they have been paying attention long enough. He got out of his truck. He looked at the coop. He looked at me. He looked at the note in my hand. He didn't say anything. He walked over. He took the note. He read it. His jaw did something. Just once. A small tightening. Then he put the note in his coat pocket. You hurt? I looked at my hand. It was blistered across the palm. I had not noticed. A little? He took my wrist. He turned my hand over. He looked at the burn. He shook his head. Marlene'll fix it. Silas, we'll build a new coop today. Silas, they said next time it's the dog. I don't even have a dog. What if You're getting a dog. What? Today. You're getting a dog. I know a fella. He was already walking to the truck. Silas. He stopped. He turned back. Wren. His voice was very steady. They set fire to your grandmother's coop. In the middle of the night. On land she paid for, with her whole life. So I need you to hear me when I say this. He came back. He stood in front of me. You are not going to run. You are not going to sell. You are going to sit down inside that shack. Marlene is coming with bandages. You are going to eat something. And then you and I are going to build a new coop. Bigger. Better. Right here. In the same spot. Because that is how you answer them. He put his hand on my shoulder. Just for a second. They think you're alone. He said. Let them keep thinking that. It's going to be the last mistake they ever make. Marlene came at 7. She did not cry. Later, I learned that she cried later, alone, in her kitchen, into a dish towel. But she did not cry in front of me. She came up the path, with a basket of bandages, and a jar of honey, and a look on her face I had not seen before. She sat me down at the wooden table. She washed my hand. She spread honey on the burn. She wrapped it in clean cotton. She worked in silence. When she was done, she sat down across from me. She took both of my hands in hers, careful of the bandage. She held them there. She did not say anything for a very long time. Then she said, Adelaide burned once. On the stove. Same hand. Same place. Nearly the same day of the year, if I'm remembering right. She wouldn't let me bandage it either. Said it would toughen her up. I let out a sound that was almost a laugh. Did it? No, Marlene said. It just left a scar. But she showed it to me every summer for 30 years and told me she was tougher than I was. Another almost laugh. This one wetter. Marlene squeezed my hands. They're going to try to break you, honey. They tried to break her too. They spent 13 years trying. She would not break. She would not bend. She stood on this ground, and she outlived every one of the men they sent. She leaned forward. You have her blood. You have her name. You have her land. And you have us. She held my eyes. You have us. They came at noon. Not the men from Blackstone. Not yet. The town. I heard the trucks first. 2 of them. Then 3. Then more. I stepped out onto the porch, and there was a line of them coming up the dirt path, pickups, mostly, some so old they were held together, with more prayer than paint. Men and women I had never seen before. Some I had seen at Cora's store. Some at the diner. Some I would not learn the names of for weeks. They just started arriving. Silas met them at the front. He directed them. Where to unload the lumber. Where to stack the roofing tin. Who was going to do what. Cora was there. Winifred, in jeans and a flannel shirt she must have kept in her car for exactly this kind of day. Pastor Greaves, with the sleeves of his shirt rolled up past his elbows. A woman I didn't know handed me a cup of coffee and squeezed my shoulder and moved on before I could thank her. Marlene came out onto the porch beside me. She put her arm around my waist. We stood there together, and we watched a town come to build a coop for a girl who had lived here for 2 months. How did you all? I started. Cora, Marlene said. But how did she? Wren. Marlene turned me toward her. Her small round face was serious now. Serious the way she got sometimes. You need to understand something, she said. Blackstone has been at this county for 20 years. Every one of these people has lost something to them. A farm. A parent. A friend. Some more than one. When Cora made the calls this morning, nobody asked why. Nobody asked what for. They asked what time. I looked back out at the yard, at the men measuring boards, at the women unloading tools, at Pastor Greaves, 60 years old, hauling a bag of nails on his shoulder like it weighed nothing, at a whole community arriving for me, because 13 years ago, a small woman in a wool coat had made a promise in a farmhouse, and a mean chicken grandmother had made the same promise on the same night. And it turned out that a promise like that, once made, does not stay with the person who made it. It spreads. It travels. It becomes something bigger. By sundown, the new coop was standing. Bigger. Sturdier. With a metal roof that would not burn. Silas hammered the last nail himself. He turned. He looked at me across the yard. "Answer them," he said. I couldn't speak. I just raised a hand. He raised his back. The dog came the next morning. Silas brought him in the truck bed. He was old. Gray around the muzzle. One ear folded down like it had given up trying. He was some kind of shepherd mix, maybe. Broad in the chest. Missing a tooth. Watchful eyes the color of honey. "Fella down the road couldn't keep him anymore," Silas said. "Wife's got allergies. He needs a home. You need a dog. It's a fit." The dog jumped down from the truck. He looked at me. He walked up to me. He sniffed my burned hand very carefully. Then he sat down at my feet, and he leaned against my leg like he had done it 1,000 times before. I put my good hand on his head. "What's his name?" "Whatever you want it to be." I thought about it. The dog looked up at me. He waited. "Barnaby," I said. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Barnaby? He looks like a Barnaby." Silas almost laughed. "Barnaby it is." That night, Barnaby slept at the foot of the cot. He put his gray muzzle on my ankle. He sighed like a man who had finally arrived somewhere he had been trying to get to for a long time. I fell asleep with my hand on his back. I did not wake up until morning. June turned into July. July turned into August. The wall grew. Every day, a little more. Every day, another handful. I stopped thinking about how much was left. I started thinking only about the next patch, the next scoop, the next smoothing of my hand against the cool, wet earth. My hand stopped bleeding somewhere in July. The blisters turned to calluses. The calluses turned into something I did not have a word for yet. Something like a badge. Something like an old friend. Marlene taught me to carve patterns into the wet cob before it dried. She showed me the sketches in my grandmother's journal, spirals, waves, small suns, the shapes of leaves. I copied them, clumsily at first. Then better. Then, slowly, in ways of my own. The house began to look like something. Not a shack anymore. Something with a face. Something with a soul. Silas brought me a goat in late July. A small brown and white doe with a stripe down her nose. He set the lead rope in my hand and said, "Adelaide always wanted goats. Never had time. I named her Clover. She followed Barnaby everywhere. Barnaby ignored her. Clover did not care. She loved him anyway. By the middle of August, Clover was pregnant. By the end of August, the garden was producing real vegetables. Squash. Beans. Tomatoes that Marlene said were the best she'd tasted in a decade. By the first week of September, I turned around one afternoon and realized I had not thought about the group home in over a month. Not once. I sat down on the porch step and I cried for a while. Not sad tears. The other kind. The kind that come When you finally notice you have been carrying something, and you have finally set it down. Barnaby came and sat beside me. Clover came and lay on my feet. The sun went down behind the ridge. And I understood, in a way I could not have put into words, that I was becoming someone. Someone my grandmother had believed in. Someone I had never met. The letter from Blackstone arrived on September 9th. Cora brought it up the path herself. She would not let the mail carrier drop it. She wanted to be the one to hand it to me. She wanted to be there when I read it. The envelope was thick. Official. Return address in some city 300 miles away. I opened it on the porch. Notice of foreclosure hearing. Blackstone Holdings LLC v. Ashcombe W. Date of hearing, October 24th. I read it twice. Cora was watching my face. 6 weeks, I said. 6 weeks. I sat down on the top step. Barnaby put his head in my lap. Cora. Yes, honey. I'm scared. I know. What if I lose? She sat down beside me. She did not answer right away. She looked out at the yard, at the coop, at the garden, at the house rising up out of the earth like something the land itself had grown. Wren, she said, you have already won something they can't take. That's not how courts work. No, she agreed, but it's how lives work. And a judge is a person before she's a judge. Winifred is going to make sure she sees what you've done here. I did not feel comforted, but I held her hand. 2 days later, Silas fell. I was not there. I was at the creek, filling buckets. Marlene had gone to the store. He was chopping wood behind his barn. He said later that his left arm had felt strange all morning. He had ignored it. Men his age often do. He was mid-swing when it happened. He said the axe just got too heavy. That was how he described it. The axe got too heavy. And then the ground came up. Marlene found him 20 minutes later. She got him into her truck. She drove him to the hospital in the next county over. She called me from the road, her voice steady the way it was in a crisis, telling me only what I needed to know. I met them there. I sat in a waiting room for 4 hours with Barnaby's leash in my lap, because Marlene had forgotten to let him out of the truck, and I had brought him inside, and the nurse at the desk had looked at him, and looked at me, and looked away, without saying a word. Some nurses know when to look away. At 8 that night, the doctor came out. Heart attack. Not the worst kind. Not the kind that kills you outright. But the kind that says, you are 65 years old, and your heart has been carrying more than one heart's worth of grief for a very long time, and it is asking you to please stop now. They kept him for 4 days. Marlene barely left his side. I ran the farm. I fed the animals. I watered the garden. I slept on the couch in Marlene's kitchen, so I could be close to the phone. On the 4th day, I drove Marlene's truck to the hospital to bring them home. Silas was in a wheelchair for the trip out. He hated it. He wouldn't look at anyone in the eye. He rolled his own chair, refusing help, until the nurse said, Mr. Beaumont, please, for the paperwork. And he glared at her the whole way to the door. In the parking lot, he stood up, slowly, with Marlene on one side and me on the other. He looked at his truck. He looked at me. He held out his hand. I gave him the keys. He put them in my palm. He closed my fingers around them. You drive, he said. That was the first time I understood how much things had changed. That evening, back at his kitchen, Silas asked me to bring him the box on top of the fridge. I brought it down. It was cedar. Old. Worn smooth on the edges from being handled. He opened it on the table. He took out an envelope. He slid it across to me. Adelaide gave me these 15 years ago, he said. Told me to keep them until I felt like they were needed. I figure they're needed now. I opened the envelope. Inside were papers. Old papers. Yellowed at the corners. A joint cultivation agreement between Adelaide Ashcombe and Silas Beaumont, dated 25 years ago. Signed by both of them. Notarized. It gave them shared use and joint stewardship of a strip of orchard along the property line. Apple trees. Some pears. It named her as co-owner of a small parcel of land I had never even noticed was there. There was also a second document, a statement of long-term neighboring cultivation, a record going back decades of the ways their lives on this land had been woven together. Fences repaired jointly, wells shared, livestock overwintered on each other's property. Legal proof, not just that she had lived here, that she had belonged here. Silas watched me read. Winifred needs those, he said, for the hearing. Silas, they won't take this from you, Wren. His voice was very quiet. They won't take it, he said again. Not while I'm breathing. And I plan to keep breathing for a while yet. Just to spite them. I laughed. Wedley. He almost laughed back. Marlene came in with tea. She set it down. She looked at us both. What? She said. Nothing, Silas said. Everything, I said. Marlene sat down. She looked at the papers on the table. Her face did not change. She had known. Of course she had known. She had probably watched him sign them 25 years ago. She reached across the table. She put one hand on Silas's arm, the other on mine. She squeezed. We're a family, she said. She said it plain. Not like a poem. Not like a speech. Like a fact. We're a family. That's what this is. That's what we are. And a family fights for its own. She looked at me. Do you understand me, Wren? I understood. And Barnaby, from his spot under the table, thumped his tail once against the floor, as if he had understood too. I drove Silas and Marlene's truck home along the ridge road, with the last of the September sun on my face. The trees were just starting to turn. A single red maple stood at the top of the rise, blazing already, as if it could not wait for the others. I passed my grandmother's gate. My gate? The house, the real house, the cob house rising out of the rusted metal, glowed in the last light. Warm brown, alive-looking, almost breathing. Barnaby lifted his head in the passenger seat. Clover was in the yard, waiting for me. I stopped the truck. I sat there, with my hands on the wheel, and I said, very quietly, into the cab of a truck that did not belong to me, on land that had almost been taken from me, in a life I was still just learning how to live. Thank you. I did not say it to anyone in particular. Or maybe I did. The hearing was 6 weeks away. I did not know how it would end. But I knew I was not standing alone anymore. I put the truck back into gear. I drove the last 100 yards home. Barnaby jumped down. Clover ran to meet him. The sun slipped behind the ridge, and the light came on inside my grandmother's kitchen, warm and gold, as if she herself had lit it and was waiting up for me to come inside. October came slow. The maples turned first, then the oaks. Then the whole ridge caught fire in colors I did not know trees could make. Amber. Rust. A red so deep it looked purple in the shadow. Silas sat on our porch every afternoon, that first week home, wrapped in a wool blanket Marlene had knit before I was born. He watched me finish the last section of the west wall. He gave instructions, with his voice, since his arms were still weak. Too wet. Yes, sir. Smooth that corner. Yes, sir. Wren. Yes? Sit down a minute. I sat down. He looked at the wall a long time. Then he said, "She would have loved this." I did not answer. I did not need to. We sat there together in the October light until Marlene called us in for supper. Winifred came on a Tuesday. She had a leather bag full of folders. She had a laptop. She had 2 other lawyers I had never met, both young, both nervous. She set up on my kitchen table. She spread everything out. She looked at me. "Wren, are you ready?" "No." She smiled. "Just a little." "Good," she said. "That's the honest answer. Now let me tell you why we're going to win." She walked me through it. Every piece. The joint cultivation agreement from Silas. The journal from my grandmother. The photographs I had taken of the house, before and after, mounted now on foam board, professional and clean. The testimony she would call. The order she would call it in. The judge she had drawn. Judge Evelyn Marsh. "She's tough," Winifred said. "She doesn't like sentiment. She doesn't like theatrics." That sounds bad. That's the best judge we could have gotten. Why? Because she also doesn't like being lied to. And Blackstone is going to lie. She closed the folder. She looked at me across the table. "Wren, I need one more thing from you." "Anything. I need you to testify." Everything in me went cold. "I can't." "You can. Winifred, I can't stand up in front of Wren." She reached across the table. She took my hand. "You have already done the hardest thing," she said. "You have already lived it. All you have to do that day is tell the truth. In your own words. In your own voice. Slowly. If you cry, that's fine. If you shake, that's fine. If you have to stop, you stop. That is the whole job." I looked down at our hands. "What if I forget everything?" "Then you will look at the back of the room. Because Marlene and Silas and Cora will be sitting there. And you will remember what you are fighting for." I said yes. I did not say much. But I said yes. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I lay in my cot under Marlene's quilt, with Barnaby's warm weight against my side, and I stared at the ceiling of my grandmother's shack. The stars were out through the cracked window. I could see 2 of them. Very bright. Very old. I got up around 3. I lit a candle. I sat at the wooden table. I opened my grandmother's journal. I turned to the last page. The one I had not read yet. I had been saving it. I had not known for what. Now I did. Her handwriting was thinner here. Older. The pen had shaken. "Wren, if you have made it to the end of this book, you have made it to the beginning of yourself. Whatever happens tomorrow, or the day after, or any day you find this page, remember. The house is not the point. The land is not the point. Even winning is not the point. You are the point. You always were. Stand up, my darling. Stand up straight. Speak plainly. Tell them who you are. I am with you. I have never been anywhere else. Your grandmother, Adelaide." I closed the journal. I sat there a long time in the candlelight. I did not cry. I had cried enough. I put my hand flat on the cover of her journal. I said, out loud, into the quiet room, "Okay. Okay, Grandma. Okay." The candle guttered. Barnaby sighed. The stars kept doing what stars do. And I sat there until the sky began to turn, and then I got up, and I got dressed, and I went to court. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. 2 stories. Red brick. A flag out front. A set of stone steps worn shallow in the middle by 140 years of people walking up them scared. Winifred met me at the door. She looked me over. Navy dress. Boots polished the night before by Marlene. Hair pulled back. Marlene's silver earrings, the ones she had worn at her own wedding. Winifred nodded once. Good. You look like a woman, not a girl. I feel like a girl. Feel like whatever you want. Look like a woman. She squeezed my elbow. We walked in. Blackstone had 2 lawyers. Gerald Thorne, the CEO, sat between them. 50-something. Silver hair swept back. A suit that cost more than my grandmother had spent on food in her final year. He did not look at me when I walked in. He looked at his phone. He kept looking at his phone until the bailiff called the room to order. Then he set it down. Slowly. Deliberately. Like a man setting down a fork after a meal he had already finished. Judge Evelyn Marsh entered. She was small. Compact. 60 years old. Silver bob cut precisely at the jaw. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her robes moved like she had been walking in them for decades. She sat down. She looked at both tables. She did not smile. She did not frown. Blackstone Holdings LLC versus Ashcombe. This is a foreclosure hearing on a lien attached to real property. Are counsel prepared? Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Then let's begin. She said it flat, like she had said it 1,000 times, which she had, but something in me steadied when she said it. She was not scary. She was just a woman doing her job, and I was just a woman about to do mine. Blackstone's lawyer stood first. His name was Preston. He was tall. His teeth were expensive. He spoke the way men speak when they are used to being listened to. He laid it out. A debt. Signed. Documented. Unpaid. A property. Encumbered. Subject to foreclosure. A defendant. A minor at the time of the original agreement, now an adult, now legally responsible. An open and shut matter. Regrettable. But clear. He sat down. He was smiling. Only a little. But smiling. Judge Marsh made a small note. She looked at Winifred. Counsel? Winifred stood. She did not walk to the podium. She stood right at the table. She did not raise her voice. Your Honor, she said, with the court's permission, I would like to begin by telling you a story. Preston stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This is a foreclosure hearing, not a... Overruled. Preston sat down. Fast. Judge Marsh looked at Winifred. Tell me the story, counselor, but make it evidentiary. I will, Your Honor. Winifred picked up a folder. She began. She told them about my mother, Marisol Ashcombe, 29 years old, diagnosed with cancer in the spring of the year I turned 3. She told them about my father, Nathaniel Ashcombe, 31, a carpenter, a man with strong hands and a soft voice, according to the 2 people in the courtroom who had known him. A man who signed a loan he should not have signed because his wife was dying, and he did not know what else to do. She told them about Blackstone. She named names. She named years. She named other families. She read from a list of 12 properties in this county alone that had passed into Blackstone's hands under identical circumstances in the last decade. She read the list slowly. She let each name land. Preston tried to object twice. Both times, Judge Marsh raised one finger without looking up. He stopped both times. Winifred put my grandmother's journal on the evidence table. She said, This is the private record of Adelaide Ashcombe. 13 years of documented harassment. Phone calls. Letters. Visits. Threats. All cataloged, dated, and signed. She put the joint cultivation agreement beside it. This is a 25-year record of continuous stewardship. Notarized. Filed with the county. Predating the plaintiff's claim by more than a decade. She put the photographs on an easel. Left side, the rusted metal shack. Bleak. Broken. Dead looking. Right side, the house as it stood today. Warm brown cob walls, softly curved. A garden. A coop. A goat pen. Smoke curling from the chimney. Winifred stepped back. She let the court look. Nobody spoke. Judge Marsh took her glasses off. She looked at the photographs for a long time. She put her glasses back on. She wrote something in her notes. Continue, counselor. Winifred nodded. Your Honor, I would like to call my client to the stand. I stood up. My legs held. That was the first surprise of the day. I walked to the witness box. I put my hand on the Bible. I swore to tell the truth. My voice did not shake. That was the second surprise. I sat down. I looked out at the room. Winifred began. Wren, can you tell the court where you spent the first 4 years of your life? With my grandmother. On the property that is being discussed today. And what happened when you were 4? I was placed in state care. Do you know why? I do now. When did you learn? On my 18th birthday. 6 months ago. I read it in a letter she left for me. Would you tell the court what you understood from that letter? I paused. I looked down at my hands. I looked up. My grandmother was afraid for me. Men connected to the plaintiff had made it clear they would use me to force her to sign over the land. She was told she had no legal recourse. So she made a choice. She placed me in state care. She thought that was the one place they could not reach me. The courtroom was very quiet. And she was right. I said. They did not reach me. They came for the land instead. Every year. She kept a record. It's in front of the court. Winifred nodded. Wren, tell the court what you did when you inherited the property. I went to it. And what did you find? A rusted metal shed. 6 acres of overgrown land. A well that needed priming. A chicken coop that had fallen in. What did you do? I stayed. Why? I paused. I looked at the back of the room. Marlene was there. Silas beside her. Cora on his other side. Pastor Greaves. Winifred's 2 young associates. 9 people on the day the hearing started. Because she asked me to, I said. In the letter. She said the truth was on the land. I wanted to find it. And did you? Yes. What did you do with the property, Wren? I built a house. With what? With clay from the creek. Sand from behind the shed. Straw from a neighbor. And my hands? Preston stood up. Objection, Your Honor, relevance. Overruled. Winifred kept going. Wren, how long did it take you? 6 months. So far. It's not finished. How many hours a day? 10. 12. It depended. Alone? I paused. No. I said. Never alone. Who was with you? Silas Beaumont. Marlene Beaumont. Cora Pearson. Pastor Greaves. Half the town of Ridgemont on the day they built me a new coop after mine was burned down. Preston stood up again. Objection. Sit down, counselor. Judge Marsh did not raise her voice. He sat down. That was when the door opened. I heard it first, because I was facing the room. Winifred turned. Judge Marsh looked up. The door at the back of the courtroom had opened, and people were coming in. Not 1 or 2. Many. Cora led them. She held the door. She looked at nobody. She just held the door and let them come. They came in quietly. No one spoke. They took the pews in the back and filled them. When those were full, they filled the ones in front of those. Farmers in clean shirts. Women who had baked bread. A man in a mechanic's jacket. 2 teenage girls, with a woman who was probably their mother, all 3 of them holding hands. An old man with a cane who nodded at me once when our eyes met. They kept coming. They filled the whole back half of the courtroom. Then they sat down. They did not clap. They did not cheer. They did not hold up signs. They just sat there. Present. I looked at the back of the room, and I found Marlene's face. She was crying. Silently. Steadily. She did not wipe her eyes. Silas beside her sat straight as a post. Preston was looking around the room now. His smile was gone. Gerald Thorne was looking at his phone again, but his hand was very still. Judge Marsh set down her pen. She looked out at the crowded courtroom. She looked for a long time. Then she said, quiet and even, "I note the presence of the community. We will proceed." She picked up her pen again. Winifred turned back to me. Her eyes were shining. She kept her voice steady. "Wren, one last question." "Yes." "Why did you not sell?" "I thought about that. I thought about the first night. The cold concrete. The letter I had read 3 times because I could not believe it. I thought about Prudence screaming in the coop. I thought about the burn on my hand. I thought about Barnaby leaning against my leg. I thought about Marlene's arms. I thought about a woman I had never really known, who had made herself a stranger to me for 13 years, so that I could grow up. I looked at the judge. "Because it isn't just my house," I said. "It's the answer to a question my grandmother spent her whole life asking. She wanted to know if a person could be loved harder than they could be hurt. She died before she found out. I wanted to answer for her." Judge Marsh did not move. Winifred sat down. "No further questions, Your Honor." Preston stood. "He tried. I will give him that. He asked me about the debt. I told him I had not signed it. He asked me about my father's signature. I told him he had signed under duress, according to my grandmother's records. He asked me if I had proof. I said, 'You are welcome to read her journal, sir.' He asked me about the property's condition. I said, 'You can see the photographs.' He asked me about my ability to pay the debt. I said, 'I can't.' That was your business model." Someone in the back of the room made a small sound. Not laughter exactly. Something drier. Judge Marsh did not look up. Preston stopped after 10 minutes. He sat down. He did not look at me. Judge Marsh recessed for 1 hour. I did not eat. I could not. Marlene and Silas walked with me outside. We sat on a stone bench in a small courtyard behind the courthouse. Silas was very quiet. Marlene held my hand. "You did beautiful," she said. "You did just beautiful. I don't know if it was enough." "Whatever happens, honey. You said what needed to be said." Silas cleared his throat. He looked at his hands. Adelaide would have. He stopped. He tried again. Adelaide would have. He stopped again. He put his hand over his eyes. Marlene reached over. She rested her hand on his shoulder. We sat there in the sun for a long time. No one spoke. There was nothing else to say. When court resumed, the room was still full. Nobody had left. Judge Marsh took her seat. She adjusted her glasses. She began. She spoke without notes. She spoke in the plain, careful voice of a woman who had been thinking hard for an hour. "This is a foreclosure hearing," she said. "Under the law, my responsibilities are narrow. I am to determine whether a valid debt exists, whether the debt is attached to real property, and whether the plaintiff has the right to foreclose. She paused. She looked at Preston. On paper, all three conditions are technically present. Preston's shoulders lifted, just a fraction. However, they dropped again. The law is not paper. The law is a living instrument, applied by human beings to human beings. It exists to protect the innocent, deter the predatory, and preserve what is decent in a society that would otherwise devour itself. She turned toward Blackstone's table. The evidence presented today includes 13 years of documented predatory contact, a pattern of similar acquisitions across this county, a debt of dubious original consent, and a defendant who was 4 years old when the acts giving rise to this lien were committed against her family. Preston opened his mouth. Judge Marsh raised her finger. He closed his mouth. The defendant, she said, has, at 18 years of age, and with no financial resources, transformed a derelict structure into a habitable home through 6 months of continuous manual labor, assisted by an organized community on land held in her family's stewardship for over half a century. She paused. She looked at me. Ms. Ashcombe, please stand. I stood. My knees held. That was the third surprise. She looked at me over her glasses. The petition of Blackstone Holdings LLC for foreclosure is denied. Something deep in my chest, something that had been clenched for 13 years, finally opened its fist. Furthermore, she said, the evidence submitted today raises substantial concerns beyond the scope of this proceeding. I will be forwarding the full record of Ms. Ashcombe's grandmother's documentation to the State Attorney General's office, with a formal recommendation for investigation. Now the room reacted. Not loudly. It was not that kind of room, but a soft, collective exhale all at once from every pew. Preston sat very still. Gerald Thorne finally looked up from his phone. His face was blank, but his hand, on the table, was shaking. Judge Marsh set down her gavel with a small, precise tap. This court is adjourned. Marlene reached me first. She did not say anything. She just wrapped both arms around me and pressed her cheek to my hair. She was crying. So was I. We stood there in the aisle of the courthouse, and we cried into each other. Silas got there second. He put one big hand on my back. His hand was trembling too. He did not speak. He did not need to. Cora joined us. Then Pastor Greaves. Then Winifred. The people from the back of the room began to move forward. Slowly. One by one. Not to speak. Just to touch my shoulder. Just to nod. Just to make sure I saw them. A woman I had never met before pressed a jar of blackberry preserves into my hand. An old farmer, wet-eyed, said only, "Your grandmother sees this." A teenage girl held out a folded piece of paper. She said, "I wrote this for you last night. I didn't know if we'd win. I'm glad we did." I did not open the paper until much later. When I did, it said only, "Thank you for showing me what a woman can do." Gerald Thorne was indicted in January. Blackstone Holdings was dissolved by court order in March. The lien on my property was voided the same week. I did not go to any of the hearings. Winifred kept me informed by phone. I asked her once if I should feel something about the man going to prison. She thought about it. "Whatever you feel is the right thing to feel," she said. "But you don't owe him anything, including hate." I put down the phone. I sat on my porch. Barnaby put his head in my lap. Clover was in the yard, with her twins, born just after New Year's, on a snowy morning when the sky had been the color of an old pearl. Silas was walking up the path, with a bag of feed on his shoulder. He waved. I felt nothing about Gerald Thorne. I felt everything about my life. The two things had nothing to do with each other. That was, I understood, the beginning of being free of him. The magazine article came out in April. Country living. 6 pages. Beautiful photographs. A young woman named Sarah, a photographer from Boston, had spent 3 days at the farm in early March. She had taken pictures of the house, the garden waking up, Clover and her twins, Barnaby asleep on the porch, me eating bread at my grandmother's table. The headline was, "The House She Built." The subheading was, "An 18-year-old orphan, a grandmother's secret, and the mountain community that refused to look away." I read the article once. I did not read it again. It was strange to see myself described. But something happened after that article. Letters began arriving. At first, a few. Then more. Then, by the end of May, dozens a week. Cora brought them up in a canvas mail sack. She said the post office had never seen anything like it. They came from everywhere. A woman in Ohio wrote to say she had spent 17 years in foster care and had never told anyone until she read about me. A man in Oregon sent a check for $25 and a note that said, "For the goats." A grandmother in Virginia wrote to say her own grandson had been taken by circumstances she had not been able to fight, and she was 72 years old, and she wanted me to know that she prayed for me every night. I read every letter. Marlene sat with me while I did. Some of them made us laugh. Some of them made us cry. Most of them we could not answer, because the writers had not left return addresses. They had not needed to. They had just needed to speak. I began to understand something I had not understood before. I had thought the story was mine. But it wasn't just mine. It belonged to every woman who had ever loved someone she could not save. Every child who had ever been given up and did not know why. Every family that had ever been ground down by men in suits with clean hands. There were more of us than I had ever imagined. We were everywhere. The offer arrived in late June. It came on stationery, so heavy it felt like fabric. A woman named Dorothy Ashford of Boston, Massachusetts, wished to purchase my property for $200,000. Cash. I sat down at the wooden table. I read the letter 3 times. $200,000. I had never in my life held $200 for more than a week. I had never seen $200,000 in one place. It was not a number to me. It was an idea. A theory. I put the letter down. I stared at the wall. Barnaby put his head on my knee. I thought about it for a week. I did not tell Silas. I did not tell Marlene. I did not want to influence them, and I did not want them to influence me. This was the choice, I understood, that my grandmother had spent her whole life preparing me to make. I walked the land every morning that week. I touched the walls I had built. I touched the young apple tree I had planted in April. I touched Clover's warm, soft head. I sat on the porch step, where the basket of bread had appeared on my first morning here. I thought about who I had been in March. I thought about who I was now. I thought about what $200,000 would buy. And I thought about what it would cost. On the 7th day, I wrote the response. Dear Mrs. Ashford, thank you for your kind and generous offer. I have read it many times. I have thought about it in every hour I have had this week. I am not going to sell. This land was left to me by my grandmother, who spent her life protecting it, and me. I built the house on it, with my own hands, with the help of a community that I love. It is not for sale at any price. I hope you can understand. With sincere thanks, Wren Ashcombe. I mailed it from Cora's store. Cora watched me put it in the box. She did not ask what it was. She just squeezed my hand. The reply came in 10 days. I opened it on the porch. Dear Miss Ashcombe, please forgive me. I have expressed myself poorly. I did not wish to buy your home. I do not believe your home is for sale, and I would not want it if it were. I read your story in the spring. I have thought of little else since. I lost a granddaughter to the state care system 23 years ago. She was placed with a family. She was moved 4 times. I lost track of her when she turned 18. I do not know where she is now. I have never stopped looking. What I wish to do, if you will consider it, is fund an expansion of your property. I would like to help you build 2 additional cottages, using the same methods you used for your own home. I would like these cottages to serve as a place of refuge and beginning for young women who have just aged out of the care system. The kind of place my granddaughter never had. The kind of place you had to build for yourself. I have arranged for the funds to be held in trust, at your direction, with Ms. Winifred Holloway as steward. You would have full authority over how, when, and whether to use them. Please do not answer this letter today. Please do not answer it tomorrow. Please consider it, and speak to those you love, and answer only when you are certain. I am not offering you money. I am offering you a door. Whether to open it, and to whom, is entirely yours to decide. With respect and hope, Dorothy Ashford. I read the letter on the porch. Barnaby was asleep on the boards beside me. Clover was in the pasture with her twins. Somewhere in the trees, a mourning dove was calling. I put the letter down. I put my face in my hands. I did not cry. I sat very still for a long time, because I understood, in that moment, what my grandmother had built. She had not built a house. She had built a door. She had spent 13 years building a door. She had built it out of her own broken heart. She had built it out of every letter she wrote and never sent. She had built it out of every year she stayed alone on a piece of dirt, so that one day her granddaughter could come and find it. And now the door was mine. And now the door was going to open. Not just for me. For every girl who came next. I answered Dorothy Ashford a week later. The answer was yes. We built the first cottage that summer. Silas oversaw it. His heart was strong enough now to direct. He sat on a folding chair in the shade, with a mug of coffee, and he told me, and Pastor Greaves, and 3 men, from town where to dig, where to set the foundation, when to add more straw to the mix. Marlene handled the inside. She sewed curtains. She stitched a new quilt. Cora took charge of everything else. Somehow, she had become the mayor of this whole thing, without anyone electing her, and no one objected, because Cora was born to run things. We finished the first cottage by September. We named the property Adelaide's Haven. Winifred handled the legal work of turning it into a non-profit. Dorothy Ashford wrote to me twice more that summer. Long letters. Careful. I wrote her back. We spoke on the phone in October for the first time. Her voice was low, grave, tired, but full of something warm weighed down. She asked if she could visit in the spring. I said yes. The first 3 girls came in October. They came in a state van. I met them at the gate. The oldest was 18. Just barely. The middle one was 19. The youngest was 17, and had been given special permission to come, because she had aged out of her placement early and had nowhere else to go. They got out of the van. They stood in a line. They looked exactly the way I had looked, a year earlier, on a curb outside Ravenhill. Duffel bags. Tight shoulders. Faces held very carefully still. I walked up to them. I said, "My name is Wren." The oldest gave a small nod. She said nothing. I did not push her. I did not push any of them. I just held out 3 keys. Small brass keys. New. Cut that morning at the hardware store in Ridgemont. I said, "One of these is for the front door of your cottage. One is for the barn, if you want to help with the animals. And one is for the pantry. That one is important. Nobody in this house goes hungry. Ever. That's the rule." The middle girl looked at the keys in her palm. She looked up at me. Her lower lip trembled. "Once," she said. "Nobody's ever given me a key before." I said, "I know. Nobody ever gave me one either, until my grandmother did." I looked at all three of them. "You are safe here," I said. "You are wanted here. You do not owe us anything for being here. You get to figure out who you are on your own time. Silas and Marlene will teach you anything you want to learn. Barnaby will follow you around. Clover will try to eat your shoelaces. Cora runs the store, and she will love you within 30 seconds of meeting you, so be ready." The youngest laughed. Just a little. It surprised her. She put her hand over her mouth. Marlene stepped up behind me. She opened her arms. "Come here, girls," she said. "Come inside. Supper's ready. You must be starving." They came. They walked past me into the kitchen my grandmother had built and I had rebuilt. Silas held the door. Cora poured milk into 4 glasses. Pastor Greaves offered a short blessing, and I stood on the porch for a moment longer, watching them all inside. The last light was going gold behind the ridge. The maples were on fire again. Somewhere in the pasture, Clover was calling to her twins. Barnaby leaned against my leg the way he had leaned against it every day for over a year now. I put my hand on his head. I looked out at the land my grandmother had died protecting. I thought about her, standing here alone for 13 years, refusing to sell, keeping the door propped open, with her own body, until I could come and take over. I thought about Marlene, sewing a quilt in a cedar chest for a girl she might never meet. I thought about Silas, promising a friend he would look after her granddaughter, and keeping the promise for 13 years, before he ever laid eyes on me. I thought about Cora, holding a door open for a courtroom full of neighbors. I thought about Dorothy Ashford in Boston, sitting alone with a photograph, and finally seeing a way to put her grief to work. And I thought about the 3 girls in my kitchen. Right now. This minute. Taking their first bite of a meal in a house, where nobody was going to ask them for anything. I thought, quietly, without saying it out loud, "Grandma, are you seeing this?" I did not need an answer. I already knew. She was here. She had never been anywhere else. The wind moved through the trees. The stars began to come out, over the ridge, one by one, the way they had done every night, since long before I was born, and would keep doing long after I was gone. Somewhere in the kitchen, a girl I had just met was laughing. I opened the door. I stepped inside. I let it close gently behind me, because behind the door was warmth, and food, and light, and the low murmur of women's voices, and the small good sounds of a home that was full again. The key that had opened this door once had been rusted, and heavy and cold. Now it hung on a nail by the entryway, right beside 3 shining new ones. And there was room on the nail for many more.